Welcome to Transformation Heroes by Feedia, a series dedicated to CX professionals. Hello and welcome to another episode of Transformation Heroes. I'm your host, Carlos, and I'm joined with François. Hello, François.
Hello, Carlos. Good to be back for another show.
Absolutely. And today's going to be a special show because we're going to be breaking some new, well, not breaking news. The news is broken already this week, but we'd like to share some news about the partnership of Stellantis, a large automaker of, I believe, something like 14 brands, and their partnership with Mistral AI, the French startup AI company that specializes in large language models, because I think there's a lot we can talk about when it comes to the AI innovations for customer experience. And it'd be great to check out the auto industry. How does that sound?
And I think what's very interesting as well, Carlos, is we have the AI Summit in France right now. Like Mistral has announced like 10-ish partnerships in the last couple of days. It's very interesting to see how many large companies are making these kind of partnerships with LLM providers. And there is some for the news, right? There's some of it which is just for the headlights. But there's also another part, which is what I think we could dig in today, which is what are they trying to change exactly? And I think if we dig with Stellantis, which is the group behind Peugeot, but also like a lot of other brands like Jeep and so on.
Price, Dodge.
Yeah, exactly. They have like tons of brands. Like what's interesting is the impact that it has on customer experience. And so we'll, I think, go through it, but more with the CX angle of like, what does that change?
Absolutely, exactly. Let's dive straight into it. When it comes to business transformation, what would you see as the kind of future role that AI would have when it comes to partnering with these large businesses like Stellantis?
Well, I think they're going full in, right? And the reason they're going full in, if you go through the articles, but also through the different type of partnerships like this, like and that's why like the title of that podcast is great, is, you know, like Transformation Heroes, is if you look it from these articles, which you will find the link in the description, like every single business is going to have to transform, is going to have to adapt, right? There is a new world coming, and every business has to transform. And if you read the article, it's very interesting because they're very clear. They're like, we are going to transform ourselves to become a tech company for mobility. It's a big jump. Like these guys are making cars. they're not a tech companies, and they used to outsource every single piece of technology. I mean, not all of the technology, but like the auto industry is very interesting because they have suppliers for pretty much everything, right? And I think when they do this kind of move, they try to compete directly with companies which are very advanced into that, aka Tesla, which is a tech company but has been there for like day one. But like a group like Stellantis, like the brands within the groups, have been there for years, like for hundreds of years. Not the group itself; it's pretty new, but the brand themselves, they were not born in a tech.
Absolutely not. No, and it's really interesting to see that a company that is quite traditional in its manufacturing process, in its selling process, is now looking to pivot so strongly with, you know, a partnership with a large language.
Yeah. And so it's kind of a bit of a case study, right? In terms of like all the episodes that we've done so far is, okay, we have this massive organization that is going to transform itself to become, or try to become, a tech company for mobility, but a tech company. And so that's going to have an impact on every single piece of the customer journey. And they don't just have one customer journey. They have like hundreds of customer journeys based on the brand, which are different personas, based on the locations, on the pretty much everything. And so that's going to impact the customer experience everywhere. And I think what's interesting is if we dive into, okay, where is AI going to make the, you know, like...
Yeah, it's really interesting to kind of maybe look into. Do you believe this is a trend that's happening in the automotive industry, you know, particularly because of the shockwaves Tesla has had over the last few years? Or do you feel like this is maybe an indicator of a broader sign? You mentioned Mistral AI partnering with other businesses as well. Do you feel like this is, you know, a shift that's happening from these massive organizations, or do you think it's
Yeah, no, it is a shift. Like all large organizations are one way or another becoming tech companies, and the competitive edge that tech companies have, they have like tech company. I like the Netflix example. Like Netflix knows very well in terms of customer intelligence. They know it very well because they have everything to measure it. They have everything to, like, it's pretty straightforward for them like if you're shipping, like containers from one side of the planet to the other, like your customer journey is a little bit more complicated than just, like hitting the login button and like looking to find your favorite movie. And so, but still, like these guys, like whether they are large logistic groups, whether they are large automobile groups, like they are going to become tech companies, and therefore they are going to have to adapt all their customer journeys. And to be honest, they're already doing that. But the thing is, AI is just going to accelerate this massively. And what's interesting is if we look at the Stellantis case study, I would say what's interesting is that it's customer experience, but in many different shapes.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they want to improve the customer interactions that they have and use AI to do that, as well as the manufacturing process.
Yeah.
Interesting to think of, the external and internal processes.
Yeah. Which one do you want to start on?
And let's go internal first, because I think that's really interesting. So
yeah, so then it's
how would they feed that?
So what they're trying to do is to leverage AI to improve in their manufacturing process, like anomalies, which is very close to what we've discussed a lot of time on a podcast in terms of like anomalies detection in the customer journey. They are doing it internally and not on interaction pieces of feedback, but on like cars. Which is they have data, like they've invested like millions of euros to make sure that they have the very best system of records, that they have like the best ERPs, so they know exactly where the car is, like where is it in the process and so on. And so they are using AI, and in their case, they're using like Mistral to actually make sure that they identify these outliers using AI to do that. And that's very, very powerful, because they could potentially save a lot of time, because right now these are done on the ground, right? And if you ship a car and it's, like it has a default or it has an anomaly, like it gets pretty expensive to send it back to factory, right? It's not just a piece of code that you have to revert, like you need to get the car back.
Yeah. And then from the external point of view, I mean, from my experience I've had over the last few years, cars are getting a bit more technically focused, in the sense that there's like cameras inside the car, detecting, facial recognition, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if in terms of the external feedback that they're getting from customers, how they're planning to maybe incorporate a large language model to get feedback.
Yeah, so it's also part of these articles. Like so there is the internal part, which is about like detecting the anomalies basically inside the different line of the production lines, right? Which is very important, massive value, and is going to have an impact on the customer experience in a way that, like if you have a car that is broke, or there's a default, or, like there is a problem with the car, like it's a big pain in the ass for the customer. It's a massive irritant. So even though it's internal, it still has a benefit for the customer experience. And then there's a second one, which is very interesting as well, within the experience of the passenger, to leverage AI to improve the customer experience of the passenger through a voice assistant. So basically being able to communicate with the basically with the car, and to have call on edge. So basically not necessarily having to make an API call the Mistral server, but basically doing it on the car.
Great. Okay. So when I'm looking at, large organizations that might potentially want to follow in Stellantis' footsteps, I'm seeing potential roadblocks when it comes to implementation. I don't know if you can maybe talk about how companies don't get overwhelmed by suddenly receiving vast amounts of information, both internally and externally, and maybe what are some ways to mitigate that from happening.
Yeah, so again, like that's where AI is part of the solution. Is and I think what's very interesting, if we look back as whether that's internal transformation or more within the process of making the car, or through the passenger experience, like at the end of the day, to be successful in this transformation, they will have to have a feedback loop within the business that's very, very, very good. And I think that's where it also makes a lot of sense with the customer intelligence philosophy, which is like they need to know exactly when something is not working. They need to be able to detect it as well with AI, so they can improve the voice assistant. They can improve the different update to the processes that they're adding, and that is going to be very challenging, because for a tech company, it's part of the culture, like this fast iteration cycle. But for those large organizations, it is a little bit harder, and that's where like the being able to have a control view of the customer intelligence, to have a layer where you can centralize every piece of feedback, where you can make sure you know which car they're talking about, which process they're talking about, and so on, so you can enrich with the right context. And then leveraging AI for all the action plan, detecting what's wrong, what's not working, and then making sure there is action, I think is going to be one of the key elements. And then I think, Carlos, the second one is there's a big challenge in terms of safety and trust, which is because it's a lot of data, right?
Yeah, and I think if we were to just explore the first point in a little bit more detail, because I think there was some really interesting points you brought up when it comes to incorporating operational context, for example. Another thing is adapting to language. So you have, for example, a car manufacturer that would be very heavily using certain acronyms that no one else uses outside the car industry. And, if you are to feed that into a large language model, perhaps that model will assume that, I don't know, something very simple like I can't think of a single acronym right now, LOL, for example, they might be like, oh, that means laugh out loud, where in fact it means large organizational levers. And without that kind of knowledge inputted into the model, you might not see the right indicators as you expect.
Yeah, exactly. But again, like that's why it's the optimistic part is that there've been like millions invested into like having the right records in place, the right system of record, where there are again like CRM, ERPs. So this is already in place. And so now the challenge is for this organization to make sure that the people whose job is to transform the whole thing, so make sure that they can tap into what's already here and make sure they can turn it into customer value at the end of the day.
Yeah. And the second thing you talk about there, I'd like to expand on as well when it comes to data privacy. There's risks of AI bias as well. Already when it came to car modeling, when it came to autonomous driving, there were some biases that were found where it was missing certain people. It was missing certain angles. It was like judging incorrectly. So already we're seeing that from a visual aspect. How do you believe companies can avoid those types of biases when it comes to digesting words, digesting facial recognition, digesting internal processes?
Like, I think it's by default, and it's been proved like last year, like by default, these systems are going to be incorrect a lot. So making sure that, again, getting back to the feedback loop, like making sure that the feedback loop muscle of the organization, if I may say, is very strong and is very fast. So when there is an issue, it's detected. And of course, when it goes to production, like your voice assistant in your next car, if there is AI that is like running under the, you want to make sure that it doesn't, that it can't stop the car like this, that it can't, like that it's missing very critical information, because at the end of the day, like your life depends on that, right? Like if the car is not right and the assistants say like your car is very good, like you need high precision, like you need more than 99.99% of precision, which is challenging for LLM because it's most LLM applications are non-deterministic, so you don't know what to expect. So that's going to be a big challenge. And that's why like making sure that there is a good feedback muscle is, like absolutely key. And then the second one, Carlos, as well on this one is like the cybersecurity aspect. It's very, very important because, like you've mentioned, Tesla is doing it with, I mean, they're not the only one now, but with recording pretty much everything, like making sure that if it's about your voice, if it's about your personal preferences, if it's about your itineraries, like making sure that all of this data is completely safe and it's not reused for, of course, training, but also that it cannot be intercepted by some device outside, even though it's encrypted and so on. Like that's going to be challenging as well.
Yeah, and I think both of those tend to fall on the CX lead when it comes to being the advocate to push best practices, because obviously there are guidelines in place, for example, GDPR, but when it comes to the potential large language models have, I think there's a little bit of a, not necessarily Wild West vibe, but there is a lot of unregulated aspects that are currently being used by industries. So for example,
but I think like in the automotive industry, like that's pretty regulated. Like I don't think it's the Far West. I think they will be very challenged. But it's going to be very fun. And again, that's true for automotive, but that's also true for a lot of other industries. For these large organizations where they're going to have like this new like vision for their businesses, and they will have to reshape every single part of the customer experience, of the customer journey.
Yes.
And that's going to be a lot of challenge. And there is the part about like, okay, how do I develop that feedback muscle, which is part of my CX responsibility, but also, as you've mentioned, like I have the other side of saying like, hey, these are good practices that I'm I'm not the GPO of the group, but I'm seeing that if I want to improve my customer experience, yeah, I need to make sure that this is in this new customer journey. So if I take the passenger, like my customer journey is going to be very impacted by the fact that my car can talk to me.
Yeah.
Like that does change a lot my customer journey. And so making sure that it's, like it's represent your customer's point of view is represented as much as possible is going to be very challenging.
Absolutely. And I think, what I was trying to get at was the idea that they're kind of, a lot of the time, the CX leads are the unsung heroes because they are the ones at the forefront.
Yeah.
You have to be flexible when it comes to understanding and digesting the information that's coming through, because as you say, there can be hallucinations, etc. But also they're the ones that can help be at the forefront of making sure that data practices are at the best quality possible and working with providers that can do that as well. Okay, so when it comes to maybe more about measuring return of investment, if we were to implement AI-powered CX initiatives, what are some maybe key performance indicators that companies should track? Is there something that you would say is a way of being able to identify return of investment when it comes to establishing AI in customer experience? I know that's a very broad question, but
yeah, I think it's a very good point, Carlos. Is the reason why they are investing like millions when it comes to like Stellantis, like they're not investing like hundreds of thousands, they're investing like millions.
yeah.
They expect the ROI on this, right? And the ROI is, we do see it at figure at not in the millions, more in the thousands in terms of investments, but the point is still the same. Is AI also makes it easier to track your return investments for a couple of reasons. So first things first, you can measure the change on your customer experience levels. So whether you use an NPS, whether you use a satisfaction score, whether you use a CES, like any kind of CX indicator, like you can very precisely measure at the end of the day, is this making my customer experience better? Like, is my AI powered or AI empowered customer journey making the life of my customer better? And one way to measure this, very straightforward, good old NPS works very well for that. And so you can already do that. And then there is that's kind of like I would say the first one. And then there is the second one, which is very interesting as well, is, okay, now how do I link this with the financial impact? And there it's pretty straightforward. Is you can see it from two angles. You can see it from if you're very good, the NPS change is going to have an impact on the people that are going to come from word of mouth to your organization. And these guys have values, which is pretty straightforward to calculate if you know where they're coming from. So that's one part of the ROI. And to give you an example, like Tesla has the best car NPS by far. Like the NPS of Tesla, I don't know it by heart, and I don't think they communicate openly about it. But it was north the 100 or north the like 95 for some time. Maybe it changed a little bit over the years, but it was
in 2023 it was 97.
Yeah, imagine like 97. That's a pretty good NPS, right? But again, because they're doing it like they're creating an amazing customer experience. And then you have the other parts, which is the detractors, which the financial impact is very simple. Like if they don't renew their car with you, how much does that cost you? If they send the car for repairs because like there was an anomaly, how much does that cost? Like, if you and you can see it from both angles. And the thing is, like when you improve the overall customer experience, you play with both. So that's why the ROI is pretty straightforward to demonstrate, because you're on one side creating more values for people which are very satisfied, and therefore making them recommend your product more, and therefore bringing new business without the cost of marketing. And then you're also decreasing the cost of churn, but also the cost of what it takes to repair whatever you're selling. In the Stellantis case, the cost of repair of the car.
Well, thanks for answering my very broad question with
my pleasure, Carlos.
Response. All right, so last question to wrap it up. I'm keen to hear your point of view when it comes to focusing on the AI industry. If you were to want to make a partnership, do you believe it should be a gradual AI integration, or do you believe it should be full-scale automation from the start?
It depends on the size of the partnership. The one we're talking about like today is a little bit of a case study, like the Stellantis Mistral AI. I think there is like these organizations are so large, of like so much resources, that they build so much stuff internally that's like they have to go the full way, and they have to invest a lot of money to have like they're going to get a lot of value out of it. But the point is, they can't just like do it step by step. Like they have to go and they have the resources to move the whole ship. I think when you are a smaller organization, what I mean by smaller, I mean like 100 people to 10,000, let's say, or you're a subsidiary of a large group. Like, I think at the end of the day, you want to start at the application level, so you solve a real business problem. So, for example, if we take the CX job, like there is a lot of AI application / partnership that you can do at the voice of customer level, that you can do at the speech to text level, that you can do at the like the customer support agent level. These three examples are, you're doing it step by step, but you're solving like a real business pain point.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know if it's better, but it's much easier. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, from experience as well, I feel like it's generally easier to focus on a use case, get that working well, and then go, all right, that one is proven the results. Now we can roll that out on a wider scale. Okay,
Absolutely.
lovely. Well, that about wraps up our conversation today. We had a little bit more of a windy conversation, so I'm not going to summarize because I wouldn't know where to start. But thank you so much for joining. Thanks to everyone that was listening, and see François in the next one.
Thank you, Carlos. Have a good one.
Bye.